Reactive dog owners, I'm going to share some techniques with you that are going to help keep you and your dog safe in the presence of triggers. Before we start this video, I want to emphasize, and I don't know if I can say this strongly enough. What I'm going to share with you today are techniques to help in situations where you have either been faced with an unavoidable trigger or variables beyond your control have put you into a situation where your reactive dog is in the presence of a trigger. These techniques are not there to act as a band-aid or a temporary solution to a problem. They are only there as tools for when emergencies arise. I will put a link in the video to a listing of certified trainers. It's an international listing, so I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find someone who will be able to help you and your dog. I'm now going to move on, and I'm going to need some dogs to demonstrate this, so let's go grab ourselves a house pony.
First things first, you need to have a good collar and lead for your dog. I'm not going to go too much into the different types of collars available. I'm just going to show you what I use for my own dogs. We call this a half check. The only reason that I like it is because it's really easy to put on and take off. You can make it small enough that your dog can't slip their head out, but it's still really comfortable when it's loose, which is what it should be most of the time. Then you're obviously going to need a good lead that goes with that. This is absolutely perfect for managing most sizes of dogs. The clip is quite big, so it's not going to be suitable for a small puppy. When choosing a lead, make sure that this part of the lead is nice and thick. That means your lead's going to be strong and it's going to be able to stand up to most situations. The mistake that a lot of people make when it comes to dealing with reactive dogs, or even dogs that are not reactive, but the person is scared of losing control, is they do this with the lead. And all that's going to do is really hurt your hand, and it also reduces the amount of, flexibility or leverage that you have, because the lead is now so short. You need to hold the lead in a way that you can quickly adapt the length of the lead and also make sure that it's not hurting you to hold onto the lead, because the last thing we want is for you to get injured or to let go because you're in so much pain. Some people also hold onto the lead like this, or they put their hands through the loop and they hold onto the lead like this. Again, you've got no way of changing the length of the lead easily, and this is potentially hooking on your wrist, and it could potentially fracture your wrist. The correct way to hold onto the lead is to pop your thumb through the loop, make sure that it's sitting nice and flush, take up however much slack you need, and then you pop that over the loop. Make sure that it's nice and flat. You don't want a situation like that. You want it nice and flat, and then you close your hand on that. What's nice there is you can adapt and you can change the length of the lead relatively easily. It's not presenting any wrist fracture risk, which is obviously important, and it's quite comfortable to hold onto. Let's get a dog and put this all together. Okay, here we have our house pony who's going to demonstrate this really nicely for us. So remember, thumb through, take up as much slack as you need. If you've got a tall dog like this, you're going to be taking up quite a bit of slack. What you're ideally looking for is that the lead is forming a nice loose J shape. Remember, if the lead is tight like this, it kind of triggers the dog. It puts them on red alerts and makes them more likely to behave like a bit of a numbskull. Let's put it that way. Yes, a numbskull. Yes. So you want to make sure that you've got that nice J shape to the lead, and I can easily shorten or lengthen the lead according to my needs. Typically, a person will walk with their dog on the left-hand side of their body. There's no rule that says you have to do this. If you prefer your dog on your right, you can easily do that. Just invert whatever you are seeing on the camera. You'll see I'm holding the lead in my right hand, and this is better because then I can, in an emergency, put a second hand onto the lead. If I'm holding it in my left hand, I would need to do that to be able to get the second hand on, and then I'm already at a disadvantage because I'm having to twist my body. So always have the lead going across your body. It sets you up for, you've got another strategy in case you need it. I'm not a big person. I'm about 5'5", average build. I have big dogs, and generally I don't struggle with controlling them because of these different techniques that I use. And of course, the dogs are pretty well trained and pretty well socialized. If you're in a situation where you're anticipating the dog lunging or having a reactive type of response to something, is to flex, okay? You want to flex your arm. You don't want your arms to be straight, because if they're straight and the dog lunges, you've got no give. Whereas if they're flexed, so your elbows are bent, you've at least got some give there that you can kind of use to your advantage. You're not going to just fall over. By the same token, you want to make sure that your legs are flexed as well. So if you're standing with your legs straight like that, there's no flexion in your knee or your hip. If there's a forward movement, it just pulls you over like a tree. So if your knees are flexed and your hips are a little bit flexed, you're much better equipped to deal with any kind of shock that might happen if the dog lunges forward. With my lead in this position, lead going across with my body, I'm holding it exactly the way that I've shown you. My arms are flexed, my knees are flexed. I'm in a much better position to be able to withstand my dog lunging out at something. Unfortunately, my guys are really boring. They're not going to lunge out at anything. Are you useless for this? Yes, you are. So they're not a really good indicator of how well this technique works. But suffice to say, as soon as you adopt these postures, you immediately feel more in control. You'll notice as well that I'll often stand with my feet in this sort of position. What's happening there, if you imagine my dog lunging forward, because my one foot is pointing out to the side, I've got a much bigger base. I'm much more stable than if my feet were pointing in the same direction. If that was happening and they lunge forward, there's not much that I can do to brace myself. Whereas if I'm standing like that, I've got a much better base and I can almost sit into it. Again, these techniques are purely for emergencies. This is not something you should be using in place of actually addressing reactivity in your dog. So let's imagine the scenario. You're walking down the road with your reactive dog, and all of a sudden you see another person or another dog heading in your direction. In a controlled situation, the best thing to do is to just try and get past them as quickly as possible, keeping yourself between your dog and whatever the trigger is in a controlled situation. So if I see another person coming with a dog, let's say the dog is my reactive dog's trigger, but they seem to have everything under control, I just keep on walking, okay? We want there to be we want to reduce the dog-on-dog proximity in that situation. However, if it's an uncontrolled situation, you need to consider the fact that using your body as a barrier or a shield is potentially just going to put you in harm's way, and it's not going to be helping your dog. In those situations, especially if your dog has already seen there's another dog coming, you can't stand in front of them and magically erase this experience from your dog's mind. It's not going to happen. In a situation like that, you're best suited to move backwards. So if you say, for example, there's a dog coming from the camera point of view, in a situation like that, I would move backwards like this. That way, you can see immediately it draws my dog to come with me. Understandably, a reactive dog is unlikely to be able to do that. But again, it's giving them the idea that we want to remove ourselves from the situation. We don't want to get involved in it. Also, if I move backwards, I'm keeping my dog and the offending dog in my vision. If I'm trying to block my dog like this, I don't know what's going on behind me, and I'm more likely to get us into trouble purely because I can't see what's going on. So in that situation, there's a trigger coming up to you. The best thing to do is to move backwards with your dog, or move laterally if you can. It all depends on the specific situation, and use the topography. If there are any natural barriers, if there's a car or something like that, use that to your advantage. There's one other technique which I think is very important to share. I call it the S&L, which stands for short and loose. I would suggest doing this before you go on your walk. You're going to make a knot in your lead at an appropriate position on your lead. And this you're going to use for high control situations. And you'll see what I've done here. I've just made a fairly loose double knot. You slide your fingers in between so that the lead is in between your fingers and the knot is in the palm of your hand. This is useful for situations where you need to keep the dog on a short leash. You can obviously just shorten up on this to get the same effect. I quite like doing this though, because now I've got 2 points of control. Yes, I know it's really hot. We're going to go in the shade now. I've got 2 points of control for my dog, and it's easy for me just to let go of that. Again, because you've got that knot, it's not going to slide through your fingers. It's really, really comfortable compared to trying to hold the lead like this. And it's a very quick and easy way to maximize control with your dog. You'll note that I call it the short and loose. You're not doing your dog any favors if you do this and then you hold them tight, okay? You're immediately setting the dog up for a reactive response if you do that. The key there is short and loose. So even though it's short, you'll see the lead clip is still hanging down. I'm still getting that J shape on my lead. We're now going to go into the shade. It's really hot today. Bill, thank you so much for your hard work.
I hope those techniques were helpful to you. Remember, they are not there as a way of working through reactivity in your dog. They are there purely as a fail-safe if you are inadvertently exposed to a trigger that you know is going to set your dog off. I think it's only reasonable that we make sure that if an emergency arises, you've got the tools to be able to cope with it. Please consult with a professional when you're dealing with reactivity. It's not really a DIY problem, especially if you have a big dog and the reactivity is really bad. I don't think it's something you should be trying to sort out on your own with tutorials. If you haven't watched it already, check out our video on possible motivations for reactive behavior in your dog. It can be incredibly useful to help you understand why your dog is behaving like this and what you can do to help them.